I guess I should just rename this segment to Sunday Morning Ramblings, I guess. That seems more
It would
accurate
be,
at this point.
yeah, because like we have two shows that come out on like Friday, so that'd be kind of like a sort of, I guess, inconvenience to us more than to people listening to it. Maybe, I don't know. I could just be like overcoming my bounds here, if that's a phrase.
Well, I mean, it is kind of rough to have two of the shows we're talking about, so half the things we're talking about coming out on the day that we record, and then the other two come out the day after it's supposed to go up.
Yeah.
Um, so that, I mean, that is the problem, but most of the time we don't not record on Friday because we haven't seen the show. Most of the time it's just because something comes up and we're busy. So then we
Yeah.
have to do it on Saturday, assuming nothing happens on Saturday either, which is what happened last week, I believe.
Yeah. Also, spoiler alert. We're watching a show that comes out on Friday nowadays. Woo.
We've always been watching shows that have been coming out on Friday.
Did thing come out on Fridays?
Yeah,
Oh, didn't even notice.
it's
I always just kind of like watched it on Fridays. I didn't even like keep track of its schedule really.
of course you didn't.
Uh,
Anyways, we should probably get into shows. We're like 3 episodes behind on everything, but
Jesus, yeah.
we're not gonna cover each episode because otherwise this will get like 3 hours long and that's ridiculous. So we're just gonna cover the most recent episodes, and if there's anything we remember from previous episodes we wanted to talk about, then we'll just bring that up because there is like one thing I wanted to bring up that we could talk about, but otherwise we're just gonna talk about the most recent stuff so that we don't like, waste everyone's time going on forever.
To be
So
honest, it's kind of getting to the point where like I kind of forget where we've like what we've actually talked about and what we haven't talked about. Like I don't know how far back we've gone with some shows. This should be a quite an experience, really.
yeah, because it's been like 3 weeks or something since we recorded, so it's like 3 episodes ago. So
Yeah.
quite a bit. Um. Anyways, we should get started on shows. So the
Mm-hmm.
first show we cover, as per usual, is ReZero. So what did you think of? I believe the 22nd episode of ReZero, Lewis.
22nd. Jeez, yeah. Well, I'm. It's kind of handy that we've kind of like had this sort of arc. Well, not really an arc, sort of battle in between the episodes we haven't talked about because essentially what we've seen so far is just like the battle, the I suppose the preparation for the battle, and the kind of aftermath for the battle, which all kind of like come together in one sort of thought. I guess like the latest episode did sort of like um carry on with the rest of the show, but I suppose like the main thoughts and main sort of talking points within the episodes we didn't talk about was obviously the battle itself. Uh, and yeah, it was everything I wanted from it, really. Like not everything I expected, mind you. Like I remember saying beforehand that uh I expected Wilhelm to die, but he didn't die. It's just some of his buddies died, and that was really it. But it was good. From everything with one thing that sticks out in my mind, and that is the whenever Subaru called the or why does what did he say to call him the witch's hand? I suppose whenever he said like he spoke aloud his power to everyone when that witch's hand came into his heart. Those sort of interactions which I loved. I believe the latest one that happened was that it kind of like it snuck stealthily to sort of like creeped into his ribcage and then just sort of tickled his heart and then like firmly grasped it. But like the one before that, it was just sort of like a tickle. I don't know. Like these interactions have been like sort of like varying and like it always sort of depends on the sort of situation which he's in. Um, I I guess how heroic he's being. Like whenever he was in the sort of when Dark Subaru was happening, the whenever he was making reference to uh
Punished
the
Subaru.
yeah Punish Subaru. Whenever he's making reference from the uh come back from death, I forget the name from it. Uh, the witch's hand would always sort of like stroke his heart kind of seductively. I could be remembering this completely wrong, but that was what I recall. Yet when he was calling off his sort of like his power right in front of the whale, it's just sort of grifted. So I'm assuming that has to do with something later on in the show, but who knows really. But like the white whale itself was the battle was I don't know, like you can't really like you can't really criticize the actual battle itself. It's just everything that kind of like leads up to it and how like the stakes are sort of like put in place. Like it doesn't really matter how the things are sort of done. If that makes sense. Like, because it's one thing to sort of have a big, humongous, triumphant battle and have nothing really become of like a sort of impact on the actual show. Like we've seen many shows that have done this. Like I suppose Cabaneri is the most recent example, really, that we've talked about. So I guess the only thing really talking points of the actual battle itself is how this sort of impacts the future and ongoings with the show. The key thing probably to talk about is probably how this is going to affect Krush. Just ignoring Subaru's sort of ongoings with the Dark Witch Cult. Foregoing with the actual like plot with Amelia, I feel like Krush will sort of have that sort of leeway with like I'm the one that sort of took down the white whale, even though she did necessarily say, "No, Subaru, it was you who took down the white whale. It was your bravery, yada yada yada." So I feel like this could be a sort of segue for her to get the priestess of the red dragon or whatever. I forget the title now. I always forget the title each week, but whatever. But I feel like that will sort of be the segue for her to kind of like get that the actual priestess crown rather than anyone else, which is strange because I feel like the show has kind of abandoned. Oh, God, what's her name? The thing that Ryan is the name that Great Knight's name. Is his name like Reinhardt or something or
Reinhard? Yeah.
Reinhardt even? Yeah. Like the girl that Reinhardt brought in.
Felt.
Felt. Yeah, I feel like the show has kind of like abandoned her. Like she kind of came in for like one episode. This would be like that surprise sort of entrant into the battle, but like she hasn't really made an appearance ever since that sort of episode. I feel like I don't know what's going to really happen for her. Is she going to be like this sort of surprise thing to the throne, or is this with this entire battle with the white whale, is Crucius automatically going to get that throne? But anyways, this last episode actually kind of made me realize something, and it was sort of the sort of, I guess, overall reaction towards Subaru's and Rem's relationship as to why, why does Subaru reject Rem? Why is he just not automatically falling for her arms? Why is he still in love with Emilia? I feel like the entire reason that reaction was there was because Emilia was never really shown on screen for like 2 to 3, maybe even 4 episodes, which kind of made the audience kind of forget about her and their entire relationship with Subaru. Because as we all know, the anime community has an immensely
Short attention
span. Yeah. So I feel like the fact that like she wasn't really a present factor within the story kind of had like a contributing factor into why like no one really gave a shit about like Emilia and Subaru. Now you could say the fact that like, well, we need to concentrate on Subaru here and his struggles to like try and get his bright side back, but even like short little 1-minute segments between Emilia and Felt, or Emilia and whoever, just kind of like arguing, and these tensions between getting each other to the priestess crown would have been enough to suffice her, to sort of like, I guess, her presence being there. Like I feel like that's sort of a sort of downside within the show. Like they kind of like forgot about Emilia and Felt to the point where like they've seen like really minor characters within this arc, and it's kind of like had an effect on like the vast majority of the people watching, because Rem really seems to be like the main, I guess, girl for Subaru, if you want to put it that way. But that's only really because she's really had the vast amount of screen time here, and Amelia's kind of been kind of forgotten about, despite the fact that like she had probably the most strong relationship with Subaru in the first half of the show. So it was probably my main real flaw and criticism of the show that's kind of became apparent with these last few episodes. But it really is a kind of minor criticism, because it's sort of a thing that's been left out rather than a thing that's been brought in to the show. The things that have been brought in have been solid. They've been very good. Like, the overall, like, I guess, subplot, if you want to call it that, between Wilhelm and the Great Swordsman, or Swordswoman even, was, well, it was nice. It was sort of a subplot that kind of like came out of nowhere, but it had enough like depth to Wilhelm, and it kind of gave him that sort of like emotional connection with the audience to sort of like drive him into like conquering the white whale. So I really appreciated that in the overall scheme of things. And also, I feel like the Dark Witch Cult sort of has like a sense of depth now that it didn't really have before, if that makes sense. Like, the latest episode had the sort of substitute to Betelgeuse, that sort of like mad woman that was essentially Betelgeuse, but just female. But I feel like it sort of stretches a lot more further than it actually is apparent, because it's been sort of like described as sort of a bigger threat as the white whale, if not bigger. So it's gonna be interesting to see how that sort of goes on, like, further on. And I still feel Betelgeuse isn't actually dead, despite the fact that Super even like said like, yeah, we sliced him in half and we even blew him up. I still feel like he's still gonna come back. Like, it's kind of like a sort of guarantee at this point with the amount of flags they like sprung up. But you know, maybe they're bringing on to better and brighter things. But yeah, no, I can't really think of anything else. That was basically my few thoughts on the previous few episodes of ReZero. Yeah.
Yeah, on the recent episode, the real interesting thing to think about, the one, well, other than obviously the ending where everyone's like, what the fuck's happening?
Oh
The
yeah, the
real
ending.
big question with the most recent episode that I had was the whole thing with the fingers and the substitution, because it would make sense in and of itself. It was just like, oh, Betelgeuse's fingers also, maybe they get his powers when he dies or something. The powers transfer. But what was confusing was the fact that her gospel was missing because Subaru had taken it, which was confusing because
Oh
I
yeah.
thought like that meant it must have been Betelgeuse's body because that's the gospel he took. Like, it's not like, she went and took it and then like it was missing afterwards, like it was already gone. So maybe what happens is as the powers transfer, so does the gospel itself. Like, the gospel itself is magical, and so like when the powers got transferred to a finger, like the gospel was also supposed to transfer, but because Subaru had it, it didn't, and that's why she was
Hmm.
confused. That's at least the explanation I came up with after seriously no kidding thinking about this for like a fucking week trying to figure this out. um at
It
least
could
that's
just
my
be a simple matter of like, a soul from like gets summoned into the body, and Betelgeuse is a sort of like a general host for like
yeah
a
I
greater sacrificial being, like a sort of it's like your soul is being elected to become a part of the Betelgeuse body or something like that.
I
Some
yeah, and like the body just kind of changes a bit as a result. That's what I thought. Although it would
yeah.
obviously also have to repair the body. But like I said, that seems like kind of a bit too much of a stretch almost. One of the other things
Mm.
I considered was that it was Betelgeuse himself just in the finger, and he was just weird and different because he's legitimately insane. But that didn't really make too much sense because even though he's insane, he would remember, or I guess he wouldn't remember Subaru taking the book because he'd been killed, but. I guess that's also still a possibility. That's still him just insane, but it doesn't seem entirely plausible because it seemed like the person was pretty convinced they were a different person. But again, like, the dude's crazy, so who really knows? Maybe we'll get a bit more of an explanation because there's still some fingers left, so we'll have to see what's up with
yeah.
that. Well, probably after we figure out what the fuck's up with Ram doing some weird fucking Zelda shit. So who really knows in that regard? Um, yeah, your comments about like Amelia and not being like focused on in the story is definitely an issue. Um, Probably the biggest one the show's had like ever. It's
Yeah.
weird because I feel like the problem is because like everything the show does like in and of itself is really good, but this is the first time where two good things have like collided against each other and like almost canceled each other out, which is the whole focus on Rem. Like episode 18 was great and like everything that Subaru did in the previous arc for Rem to help her, and then she was returning the favor along with Subaru at the end, saying, I can't return these feelings, like I appreciate them,
Mm.
but I'm in love with Amelia. Like all of that was handled really well. But the problem is after the fact the show's still harping on Rem so much, like almost like I almost feel like they're doing it because they know there's so many psychotic Rem fans. They don't want to piss them off, because there was like an interview with like the composer and the director, and one of the questions was asking the director who the real main heroine was, and it's obviously Amelia. Like story wise, it literally is
Yeah.
Amelia. There's no question about that. But he refused to answer the question, and I'm pretty sure the answer he gave was, "I don't want to piss anyone off." So, like he's not stupid. He'll know if he picks someone, people will get butthurt and not buy the fucking discs. So he's smart and not saying anything. But I feel like he's trying to not piss off, the Rem audience so much that he's like doing all these like cutesy scenes with her. And the problem
Mm.
is doing all this like cutesy, like endearing stuff with Rem and building the chemistry with Subaru is almost directly undermining the whole goal of Subaru getting back to Amelia. Like,
Yeah.
it's taking the focus off of her too much. Like, it's fine here and there, but, when you have the scene where she's like, oh, come back to me, and, puts the finger to his lips and there's sparkles fucking everywhere, you're going a little overboard. Like,
Mm.
that was the scene where I immediately knew something was off, because that's when it was like, this is going too far. Um, so that's, like I said, in and of itself, I like that we have a side character who wasn't completely abandoned and is actually, like, doing things that are important and make sense given what happened in previous arcs. But
Yeah.
the problem is it's undermining the whole thing with Amelia, and maybe it could have just been fixed. It would have been fixed really if Subaru just talked more about Amelia and stuff, and we don't necessarily need to see more of Amelia, but there needs to be more of an established push that Subaru really wants to get back to her. Which it
Yeah.
does a little bit. Like usually the conversation before the battle, he was talking about getting back to Amelia, I'm pretty sure, before stuff with Rem happened. But Subaru keeps getting flustered over stuff she does, which I guess makes sense because he's like a neat dude and he's like, oh my god, cute girls, like she's saying things to me and she likes me
Yeah.
and stuff. So like I guess it kind of makes sense in character, but it's like almost like it's trying to build a relationship between them when Subaru's already rejected her, and it's just kind of awkward. It's
Mm.
like I actually like maybe it was just something lost in translation, but it actually really rubbed me the wrong way when after the battle he described Amelia and Rem as his number one and number two. I thought that was actually pretty fucked up because it's like, yeah, I've got a backup. It's like, what the fuck?
I suppose it's just sort of like people to rely on, like sort of like
Right.
good, like
He means people he cares
Yeah.
about. He doesn't mean as
Yeah.
far as like girlfriend material or anything like that. He just means the people he cares about. I get that. It's just it's because of everything that happened, like it made me interpret the line
yeah,
that
you
way.
can get it
So
that way. Yeah. Yeah.
it's just like I said, it's a conflict of the two like conflicting with each other a bit too much. But yeah, it's I'm really eager to see what happens in the next episode, which will be like an hour after this goes up. So
yeah, shit.
that'll be cool. There's still plenty of potential for important people to die, given that there are fingers left and some lackeys have already started getting killed off. I'm still will be completely unsurprised if Rem shows up anyways and ends up dying, which I feel like maybe at this point maybe needs to happen given the complaints we just went over. Because
There
it
will
would
be war though.
yeah, I know, but it would be thematically fit given, we need to establish the point of like Subaru can't fix everything, and
Mm.
also the fact that it's interfering a bit much with the whole thing with Amelia, which maybe just gets fixed in the next arc regardless. She doesn't need to die, but I still feel like this story's setting up for a permadeath of some kind. You know,
Yeah.
it just feels like it's going for that angle. So
Like, yeah, even I'm starting to like sort of get like those sort of like inclinations, you know. It's just it's almost sort of like everything's been going too well, you know? Like things have to like start going sideways.
right, like
Like
people
I'm
get
not saying like, you know, like shit has to go bad for like Subaru all the time, but like, you know, it's been kind of like set up this way ever since the story. It's been kind of like coming out of this second arc, you know.
yeah, like see people have been dying, but they're like no name lackeys that you don't give a shit about. So
Mm.
it's someone important has to get killed, which I guess was kind of the point with the previous iterations of Subaru, where he just fucked up entirely and like a bunch of
Yeah.
people got killed. But it still feels like there needs to be like a true route per se run of Subaru where someone gets permadeath and there's nothing you can do about it. Especially because now, like you mentioned, they're making the whole connection with his power and Satella being much more clear, which is almost like a what was the comparison I was going to make? I was going to compare it to something. I don't remember what it was, and I want to take the time to remember it, but it almost seems like it's one of those things where you're digging your own grave, where like you're abusing your power. It seems like the more he's using his power, the more his connection to Satella is getting stronger.
Yeah.
Because the first time she appeared, she was kind of like away from him the first time during the battle that happened, and she kind of said something. And the second time, she was much closer to his ear when she was whispering. It almost seems like, and the fact that she's appearing now at all almost seems like he's making this connection to her stronger as the more he's doing it. And everyone keeps mentioning the smell's getting stronger on him, like constantly. So it almost seems like he may be digging his own grave by abusing his powers this way, which is another, kind of setup for shit to go wrong based on his powers. Like, maybe Satella's going to start having more control over his resets and they're going to start getting more random. Maybe they won't be at a set checkpoint anymore. Maybe they'll just be set, in random instances, things like that. Who really knows? I think the more interesting theory, or at least an interesting theory I heard was that there was a theory, what was it, someone had a theory where the idea of the cultists, because everyone keeps calling Subaru Pride, and someone had a theory I remember reading about how maybe everyone in the cult had like a return by death style power, and like that warped them mentally to the point where they are now, and now they're a member of the cult, which was interesting to think about. Because if you think about it, Subaru becoming Pride, with the only reason Subaru has been able to get through these arcs at all is because of the help of other people. And it's interesting thematically how that's a thing, because it's like the only way he's able to get through any of this is because of other people helping him out and him relying on other people. Like the first arc, he confides in Reinhard what's going on, who ends up coming, he tells Felt to go find Reinhard, he comes and helps. It's almost like when he acknowledges that he can't solve the problem, that it's when the problem gets solved. Like he can't do it on his own. Because, as I just said, Reinhardt does the first arc. The second arc is with Amelia when he breaks down in her lap and she makes the comment about how he's a good person to Rem, and which leads to the mates trusting him. And now the third arc was when he explodes in front of Rem and she explains that he's, a good person and she can't let, the darkness consume him. Like, whenever he makes himself emotionally, not necessarily in the first arc because it was more of an intro, but so
Yeah.
far, it's whenever he makes himself emotionally vulnerable and confides in people and relies on them, that's when he manages to succeed. So it's interesting to think about, what if these other people were also in a similar situation but didn't have anyone to help them out? Like, what if Subaru didn't have people helping him out and he kept returning by death constantly and it warped him? Maybe then he would have become Pride. It was an interesting theory to think about, because it makes sense given the fact that he's never actually solved any of these arcs purely on his own, and it's really just by other people's help or power that he's managed to do it. So it's an interesting direction thematically. Also, potentially interesting ways the story could eventually end up going, given what it's doing.
Dark end, yeah.
Not necessarily a dark end, but just thematically interesting ways it could go, given that. But yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say about ReZero. It's been a while. I mean, there were a lot of episodes to talk about.
Yeah, like it's kind of interesting because like we've seen just continuing that sort of like the theory there. Like we've seen what like how many times did he die trying to like save Amelia? Was it like 3 times, 3 to 4 times? In that sort of ballpark, he already sort of like managed to sort of become punished Subaru, you know? Like he managed to like become like that sort of he embraces dark side to just do whatever he can, whatever anything within his power to just try and accomplish his goal. When you think of like and extend that a little bit further and you kind of branch it out to the witches cult, these probably people have died way more than like 3 to 4 times, you know, which will definitely explain their insanity. Like it's one thing to sort of like have that sort of desperation towards that's kind of been brought about towards like the sort of like repeatedness of the situation, you know. But like eventually, if Subaru kept going on through that line, he definitely would have definitely been on the sort of path towards Betelgeuse. Betelgeuse, I can't pronounce it. And it was kind of interesting to like have that sort of confrontation with Betelgeuse and Subaru, while Subaru was sort of, I guess, at his peak of, you know, being sort of in a sort of dark state, you know, and Betelgeuse almost seems sort of disappointed with his sort of uh state, you know. So I feel like that it does the theory does have a lot of bit of substantial weight to it. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes in regards to see how the witch cult sort of originates, you know, because I'm curious to see how Satella uh affects the story as a whole. I wonder if like she is only affecting Subaru alone, or if she has like sort of a greater power within the actual universe. Like, is she in control of the actual wishes cult? Are they simply just a group of insane people, or do they sort of do they go by laws of their own sort of thing? It'll be interesting to see how it sort of branches out. The main thing I'm kind of interested in is how they're going to sort of give closure to Subaru's death by returning, or I forget the name. Because we're on episode 22, and like there's only like what 24 episodes of ReZero, 26. I forget.
25.
25 in between. So they got like 3 episodes left now to sort of like give that proper closure. But maybe they could be set up for a season 2 here, but it'll be interesting to see how they sort of branch out things, because like things from here seem to just be setting up I guess a closure to like us versus the witches cult, you know. That's all they seem to be going for. That being said, you know, this could be just the perfect time for them to sort of like approach the entire like Satella affecting Subaru, because they've definitely been sort of like building that up until now. So I'm definitely interested to see how things go with Subaru. Not necessarily how things go with the plot, because I feel like, you know, other than things happening with the white whale, that's sort of been sort of the plot overall plot has been kind of been taking a back seat to everything, with everything being like a focus on like Subaru and I guess Rem. So it'll be nice to see how things carry out from here on out.
Yeah, pretty much. Is that everything you want to say about ReZero?
Yep.
All right, we should move on to the next show then. I believe we usually cover Orange next. So
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
what did you think? It kind of matters, man. I gotta keep the order consistent, otherwise people will comment on it. They'll be like, "Why isn't the order the same?" I'm pretty sure we cover Orange next. So, what did you think of the most recent episode of Orange, Lewis?
Like I am definitely enjoying things going on, but I don't know, like I wonder if it's just me, or things have just been kind of going at a snail's pace recently, because I remember thinking like they definitely had like those sort of big events going on within the show. Like obviously, super. It's been super. It's
Subaru.
obviously it's obviously been like a sort of apparent within the show that Kakeru and Ir- Kana, yeah, likes each other. So but it's been kind of funny for me because like despite that big event, there doesn't really. This could just mean me just wanting something extra from the show than it's going to give me, but like it just feels like something not much has changed, you know? Like they're really abiding by the status quo. Maybe this just isn't. Maybe this is just me, and I actually like don't know people and how they interact. But like it was kind of funny to me when like there was that sort of interaction with Kakeru and I want to say Iroha.
Why do you keep trying to call her Iroha?
I forget her name. That's because I forget. I call it Kana because like Hanazawa Kana, but like
Yeah, that's like how it works. Just
I
do
was
that.
gonna.
You remember people by VAs anyways. It's just easier for
That,
you to remember that way.
that's a good point. I'll call it Kana from now because I forget her name.
It's
Um,
not Ho, but like I said, you'll
Naho.
more easily remember Kana.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, like it. It feels like they sort of had that like that mutual confession 2 episodes ago, even though it was like 1 episode ago, and it's only been sort of a thing that I was like, well, do you want to go out now, sort of, and like, weren't they weren't they already are they supposed to already be going out? Like I don't like knowing the fact that they like each other, like they keep sort of this sort of overall like kind of agenda going on between them, thinking like, oh yeah, we both like each other now. This is if we go out, things might change. Like things are already gonna change, man. Like you both like know that you want to like fuck and shit. Like come on, like things are gonna change. No matter what, you might as well like seal the deal here and like pop her cherry. But like things are just gonna be
Wow.
like things are just gonna be like I don't know, like things have definitely been a sort of at a slow pace. I feel like that's they've sort of like kind of shifted the focus. Definitely with this latest episode anyways, they've like shifted the focus between the relationship between Kakeru and Kana and just kind of like concentrating on actual Kakeru and his past because we had the various sort of scenes and imagery focusing on Kakeru and how I guess lonely he was at the sort of sports meet, I guess, with all the sort of like, there were a bunch of people around him, but he was actually all alone. And he was all alone in a big white space. We got it. He was lonely. Um, so yeah, I feel like they're definitely shifting the focus onto that now, and maybe sort of like having a sort of cushion for Kakeru to sort of fall upon with Kana and him potentially going out, and maybe that's what the sort of like good end will be if they manage all to follow the letter, or yeah, yeah, if they all manage to follow the letter and manage to not make him kill himself. So it's I feel like that's the sort of direction going towards now. I feel like that's probably the proper direction they can probably go towards now because like I feel like the show is at its best when it concentrates on the struggle to keep Kakeru alive because the the kind of like drama, if you want to call it that, with Kakeru and everyone else trying to like get to know him and trying to make him open up about himself. Like that feels the most genuine out of all of it, and it probably feels the best. As just in regards to myself, anyways. So I feel like whenever they do those scenes and whenever they concentrate on Cocker's sort of dilemma and agenda at the moment, that's when the show is at its best. So if they continue sort of going down that route and trying to have that sort of like I will try and save you from killing yourself rather than I will try and bang you. So I feel like that would be sort of the better route it will go down towards. I'm not like, pushing aside the sort of like romance here, but like, I feel like that will probably be a good sort of closure for Kakeru and Kana rather than that being a sort of, I guess, the forefront of the show rather than just the actual romance side of things. Because that's how the show was sort of set up in the first place. The entire like dilemma and the sort of like plot hook from the start was like, let's try and save the transfer student from killing himself rather than let's try and go out with him. So I feel like that's probably the best way to go for it, and they are going for it, so I can only applaud it. My only real criticism, and this is really just a personal criticism with the show, is that I feel like there's a lot of fluff going on, but hey, I think that's just been my general criticism of the show so far, so you can just ignore that for what it's worth.
I mean, it makes sense that they wouldn't necessarily go out, because like the reason Kakeru doesn't want to is obviously because he's depressed and he doesn't want to like pull Naho into that. So that's why he's kind of he's like trying to keep people away so he doesn't hurt them, because he's hurting himself. Like, it's, what's the word? It's not projecting necessarily. It's like kind of isolating yourself to prevent hurting other people while also hurting yourself in the process, kind of. It's
I just said
complicated. So that kind of makes sense. The real problem here is that Naho is the dumbest person on the planet, because literally they'll do stuff like, she'll be like, oh my god, he wants to hold hands. What does this mean? Like, she's literally the stupidest person on the planet, because like even the friends confronted her and they were like, oh hey, Naho, what's up with Kakeru and all that stuff, what's going in that regard. And what was she say that he wanted to do? Something about like wanting to walk home together or something. It was something like wanting to walk home together, and she was like, he wants to walk home together with me, and blah 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 blah. And they were like, oh, that's okay, that's neat and stuff. And it's like, do you understand what that means? And she's like, no, I don't get it. And it's just like, what the fuck? Like, the dude, like, literally, like even the friends are just like, he wants to walk home with you. What do you think that means? And she's like, I don't know. And it's just like, Jesus Christ, girl. Like, how thick can you get? Like, it made sense before, because it was, like, more a conflict of, like, what she should do versus what's in the letter, and, like, how that's difficult, because the whole point was, like, the letter told her to do things, but it was hard for her. Like, it was telling her to, like, be open with her feelings, and she's like, it's not that easy, I can't just do it and, like, just trust the letter that it'll work out in the end, especially because this was before she, like, completely trusted it, too. So, like, that conflict at least made sense. But now he, like, he literally could be like, yo, girl, want to make out? And she's like, what does it mean? Does he like me? And it's just like, oh my god, please stop. Like, I thought the drama with, like, the one chick who was being a bitch was dumb. This is even more dumb. Like, can we just bring that chick back if it'll make Naho be less stupid? Because, seriously, like, I still like the show, but that is the dumb... She's so stupid, and it's so irritating because of how stupid she is. And it would make sense if she got better, but she's, like, literally just as dumb as she was, like, an episode ago. Like, she doesn't get any better at all. And it's just really irritating to watch this, like, constantly stay the same. Especially because, like, their actions keep escalating, and she just, like, doesn't get it. Like, I get not understanding signals, when you're a teen, and, like, that's complicated, but, like, literally when it keeps happening, and, like, they've even already had a conversation where they're like, if there's anyone I'd go out with, it'd be you. And then even after that, when he's all like, oh, hey, let's hold hands, let's walk together, I want to help you with this, she's just like, does he like me? Like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Outside of that, the show's still good. I like how it's handling, it's almost going with this arc right now that even with the knowledge they have that he's depressed, and all that stuff, everything they're doing like almost isn't doing enough still. Like he's still depressed. Like how like it's the portrayal of like how strongly like he feels about his, you know, his guilt towards his mother, whether he should feel that or not, which he obviously shouldn't, is like probably the strongest part of the show. And so I get the idea that it's slow, but I think that's just on Naho being an idiot end of things rather than like anything being portrayed as far as on Kakeru's end. Because something to talk about in the previous episodes, like is the example I mentioned I wanted to talk about something when we started recording this, was the confrontation scene in the classroom with Naho and then Suwa busting in, where they like legitimately confront him and almost force him to talk about his feelings,
Yeah.
was really strong. Like I actually started to get a little emotional. Like they handled that really well.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, like where they like literally just up and asked him, they were like, "Do you ever think about killing yourself?" And he just like finally admitted it. It was like there was a nice grace to that scene that you don't see in shit like, you know, in Keyworks, where like the overly dramatic music would be playing and everyone would start crying. Like obviously Kakeru was starting to tear up, but that's just because he was being emotionally open for once. Like the portrayal of that scene was spot on. Like I really liked that. So, and I have a feeling more stuff like that's coming up considering what's been going on so far. So it's I really liked that, and I'd said that like 3 times, but I did really like it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they go from here as far as like if they keep that level of portrayal up. It'll be really interesting.
Yeah. Just as a side note, just that overall conversation, the production quality, like I feel like that's a sort of topic conversation which we kind of ignored so far.
Mhm.
It's gone to shit, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, the most recent episode. To be fair, I think it was a similar problem. We'll get to 91 Days right after this.
Oh yeah.
I think it was a similar problem 91 Days staff were probably having with the level of quality they were doing. Although arguably Orange looked better than 91 Days from the beginning. The level of animation quality probably caught up with the staff. Like a lot of time wise, staff just can't keep up with the scheduling of anime. Like it's brutal timing and work.
Yeah.
Like especially if you read on what happened with the whole Ace Attorney team with their anime, they apparently started making that show in like February. Which is why the show looked so shit at first, because their goal was like, okay, let's just pump out the first 5 episodes as fast as possible, and then we can focus on the rest of the episodes and like actually like make them good. Like apparently, at least that's what I hear is what happened with the production, which is why like suddenly I started liking the show a lot more. Like at first it was like, oh, another game adaptation, whatever, but I just kept kind of like watching it because it was easy to watch. And then suddenly like it started getting good. Like there's a lot of like, it's still very much a game adaptation in a game that really doesn't work in anime format, but they're trying their hardest and it has its times. But this isn't about Ace Attorney.
Yeah.
I think the point is that the time caught up with them, and instead of doing like a bland recap episode, they decided to just cover this episode and cut the losses where they could. Because there are so many off-model shots in this episode, it's insane. Like, there are so many derp face shots in this episode. I was going to screen cap all of them and tweet them, which would have taken a good 5 tweets for that. Like, and I'm not even talking about random background characters. Like, I don't mind if random background characters look a bit derpy, because who gives a shit about them? But, like, the main characters themselves, when they're talking, have, like, these derp faces on them. Their eyes aren't aligned half the time. Suwa had, like, I think in one conversation, his mouth was just hanging open. They didn't bother to close it. Like, it was... The production quality really shot itself. And we'll see in the next episode what happens, but I think it was because they were cutting corners because they needed more time for the later episodes. We'll see if it's just general, like, failure in the next episode if it keeps up the same shit quality. Although, to be fair, it could be a 2-episode affair, and then it gets better. But I think it was because they were trying to cut their losses to make the later episodes better, but we'll see.
I feel like, well, it's been sort of a general a theme within the recent few episodes, in fairness. Like, the sort of, like, the scenes where, like, they needed that sort of, like, production value, got the production value. Like, the sort of, scene which we were talking about with, when Kakeru, like, opened up, that got a lot of, like, definite love and attention towards. Whereas some of their, like, general, like, conversations and whatnot have just been sort of like, just draw them, flap open their mouths every now and then. Like, that sort of, like, attitude has been kind of like, I guess, a theme throughout it. So it's definitely been a sort of noticeable thing for the past 2, maybe 3 episodes. So I feel like they've been either, one, they're completely out of budget right now, or 2, they're saving budget for the final few episodes, which I feel is the case, because they've definitely showed off like the amount of work they produced into the show, and yet they haven't really gone over the top yet. So that's kind of given me the inclination that like maybe that they're just saving it all up for one big crescendo at the end, So I guess at least we got that to look forward to.
Well, it's not uncommon for shows in general to cut corners where they can to save it for the more impactful scenes. The character models in Orange are a bit more detailed than your usual anime flair, though, so that's part of the reason probably why they started making those simpler couple episodes ago. But I mean, even something like ReZero, like if you notice, there was a shot when he was talking with Betelgeuse, where the easiest way to describe it is it like looked like Betelgeuse had lost his anti-aliasing, like his edge lines got border like blurry as fuck, and he was talking about stuff, and it was right when he was talking about the sentence where he's talking about the gospel or whatever is when it happens, like when he pulls out on his first talking about it or whatever, before he like holds it in front of Subaru. Like that's a shot where it like looks like it just zoomed the fucking, like it's almost like the shot was way bigger than was like what is shown, and they just zoomed the fuck in on him because his borderline is blurry as fuck. So there's always they cut, like studios cut corners wherever they can. They just try and sneak it by for the most part if they have, the talent or money or time or whatever to do so. It's just when they don't that you get stuff that, like Orange and 91 Days pull because they don't have any other choice.
Yeah, like that's, well, obviously I'm not gonna deny that, but like even like some basic shit that's been going down, like they've almost been doing like what I like to call academia like faces to like some reactions and shit that's been like within the classes. Like I remember there was like one tweet that happened that was actually kind of funny that like showed all these faces, but I don't know, like obviously like the scenes that like they've obviously, it was apparent that they've been cutting corners. Well, I wouldn't even really cutting corners now. It was really just like going the full on Monty of just like being lazy with it. But it's been very apparent for the last few episodes that they've definitely been trying to save money and budget towards some great ordeal. So I don't know. Maybe like this has definitely been a sort of like the poor like dirt faces and shit have made me excited towards something bigger that's definitely going to come along. So it's a positive, sort of, I guess.
Was that everything you wanted to say about Orange?
Yeah.
We're spending a while on these shows, but that's okay because
yeah.
it won't take long to talk about 91 Days because
Jesus, yeah.
I mentioned when we first started covering 91 Days that I was wondering if given that Studio Shuka seems like the one that doesn't seem to have the time, budget, or maybe talent, or some combination of the three to handle doing shows, it seems, given the infamous Durara episode where the in-between frames were straight up missing, I was wondering if something similar was going to happen in 91 Days where it would shit itself, and the answer is a technical yes. Instead of the in-between frames and going to shit, they just straight up put out a recap. At least some shows like Twin Star Exorcist has its issues, but at least its recap episode actually had new things happening, and it was just characters talking about past events. 91 Days was straight up just like, let's just cobble together as much footage as we can into an episode that we've already done. So
I didn't even watch it.
That happened. Yeah, I watched it to see if it was going to be that or like the Twin Star Exorcist one where it would actually had some new stuff and they talked about it. No, it's literally just all the footage from previous episodes that was like viable to like work as a summary. It even literally ends the episode the exact same way as the last one, where the credits roll and then the after credit scene plays where the main character's all like, I'm your brother now. Like it literally ends the same way as the previous episode. But yeah, what did you think of the most recent episode of 91 Days, Lewis?
The most recent episode was definitely a peak in quality, I must admit. Like when they sort of have the typical, I guess, mafia dealings with, like, sudden betrayals, whoa, going about. Like, that's definitely sort of like where it peaks, the sort of like actual politics and them just going about doing their own sort of business to sort of like keep afloat. That's when it's sort of like kind of drawn out, because I still don't know who's who really. Like, it's it's definitely sort of a guessing game at this point. Like, they've introduced that sort of bureau dude now, so there's one more guy to keep track of. But like, it feels to me that the show has lost track of its main selling point, that being Angelo's quest for revenge. I was desperately hoping that this show would keep track of that, keep that sort of like that being the main focus of it. I would want nothing more than this just to be a one-man show of him just like killing off, subtly and silently killing off members of the mafia to like get revenge, and ultimately culminating in him killing off Nero. But now it's definitely going into a sort of direction of just mafia uh actions and wars, basically, which is, when it has that sort of dynamic with Angelo in there, it is definitely interesting. But because like he has that sort of, maybe he has a sort of dilemma going on about, like, oh, does he actually have a little bit of loyalty to Nero now, or does he love the life of a mafia criminal now, or does he actually really want still to kill Nero? Like, it's still out there. I feel like that's sort of a question that we've kind of pondered on our own, whether rather than the show wanting us to question that. I feel like they're just kind of assuming the audience will sort of get what they're trying to put out, and what they're trying to put out, as I'm assuming, is that Angelo still wants to kill Nero, but he's just sort of going along with everything. And the thing that he's been going along for have just been sort of, eh. Like, it's just basic mafia stuff, really. Like, it's probation. We're going to produce moonshine, and we're going to sell it. We're going to have someone else to control and monitor the moonshine and stop the moonshine, and blah blah blah. Standard mafia stuff. The entire dynamic, which is what the show is, uh, I guess, good for and has that quality for, is essentially abandoned at this point, which is a pretty bad thing, because the opening few episodes were definitely the high point, when that sort of had that sort of like, it had the key concentration on Angelo and his sort of quest for vengeance. Now it's been sort of all over the place with these characters that you're not all that familiar with, yet we're supposed to have these sort of like automatic assumptions and, I guess, uh what's the word? Not necessarily sympathy, but just a general sort of connection with them. Uh, and it's definitely had that sort of showing that lack of quality within the last few episodes. I'm not necessarily going to go on a limb here and say it's bad. It's definitely just going a massive misdirection here. Like, it's got this big, great story which they can just exploit to the max, and it'll be good shit. But they're just going off board here and just completely going off in another direction, and just concentrating on just mafia wars of basic shit, which I'm sure in Japan is a sort of new thing, but here in Western society, we have dozens and dozens of mafia movies that we've seen this all before, and to me, it's just not that, satisfying, really. It's frustrating to watch, because I'm just here for Angelo and his quest for revenge. I don't give a shit about everything else happening in the show.
Yeah, I mean, I I get it. I slightly disagree though, because I think this episode was starting to bring that back on track, just with a focus on Cortio instead, and how like Angelo's brought him into this and like has fucked over his friend for his revenge quest. I just don't think the betrayal is going as well as they'd hoped, because it seems like the whole point at this point is that Angelo's kind of like losing his focus of his revenge quest because he's like so absorbed in the mafia lifestyle at this point. Like he's still trying to find the fourth person, which is why he's been reluctant to do anything. But the it's not portraying it quite well enough. So which is why, unsurprisingly, the angle in this episode was like how he's fucking over his best buddy in his revenge plot, and how like it's just like I feel like it's almost too late for it to be doing any of this. I guess maybe it was planned from the beginning. Like, I guess it would make sense if maybe they planned from the beginning where the recap episode was going to be, because it'd make sense right before something like this. But at the same time, like, I feel like it almost took too long to get to this point, because the idea is obviously, like, his revenge plan and how it's, like, screwing him over. Like, from the beginning, was almost seemed like the betrayal was obviously going to be how his revenge plot is, like, consuming him. It almost seemed like, which is why it was kind of interesting with the investigator and his family, because, it seemed like the idea was, I thought it was interesting that they didn't die. I thought they were going to straight up die, and the idea was going to be that Angelo became the very thing that he hated so much, because, he would have killed his family because of his, the father's actions, which is literally what happened to his family. So it would have been interesting, but they didn't die, which is why it's interesting. I wonder who tipped them off, if it was Cordio, or maybe the plan was never to, like, actually kill them in the first place. It was just to scare him. Like, I don't actually know. It seems like no one really said anything, but whether it's because they didn't know that they actually lived, or because that was the plan all along, I don't know. But who can say? Maybe we'll find out a bit more later. Or maybe it was just that was the plan all along. And, I mean, if they don't say anything, I'll assume that it was the plan all along. But it would have been interesting if maybe, Angelo had tipped them off, and helped them out so that he didn't actually kill them, because he still has that last little remnant that wants to not become the thing he hates. But I don't know. But like I said, it's how do I word this? It's like the show's trying too hard. Like the idea, now with, like I mentioned, Cordio, getting fucked over because of Angelo's revenge quest and how he pulled him into it. Like, I actually like the confrontation where, like, he finally yelled at him about how he was the one who pulled him into this whole deal. Like, that was actually a nice confrontation. But now it's almost like doing it too much. Like, it's like, it almost like it can't dig a hole deep enough. So, like, instead of just, like, laying the groundwork, it just dives in head first. Like, instead of, all this shit fucking over Cordio, like, now he's killed, a mob leader, and now, like, we're gonna have to see how that goes along. And it's almost like they set up all this stuff with Fango, and then they just killed him off, which in one story might actually be good, because the whole point is, like, how, anyone could easily get killed off. But in this kind of story, it's almost like it's rushing things. Like, whenever something big happens, like, all this crazy shit starts happening. Like, they killed off Orko in, like, an episode. So,
Oh yeah.
like, all these big name people just, like, get killed off at the drop of a hat in order to, like, do something big and dramatic, and it doesn't have, like, enough weight to back up the big actions. So, like I said, it's almost like it's trying too hard in a way. I don't really know how else to word it, but, I mean, we'll see how it goes. I'm still interested to see where they take Angelo's story, which we don't really have a clear grasp on still. But, yeah.
Yeah, like, it's just been like, yeah, the last episode was definitely good. It was definitely a sort of shooting up in quality, I suppose with Quadra, Cordio, boom, with his sort of like I guess he was, a sort of either one being a segue into like the actual plot with Angelo and the speech, sort of like, now we're going to concentrate on him because, like, look what he's doing to his friend, or he's just, now since he's killed Fango, he'll be a sort of, I guess, either one, a catalyst for Angelo to just be a fully fledged member of the mafia and say fuck it, this guy is essentially going to start a war, I think, between two factions here, so I gotta, like, kill him off and ensure my safety and security and wealth as well. So it's definitely going to bring up a lot of dilemmas here, which are going to be sort of like maybe a moral decision within Angelo's, like, do I kill a friend for my own personal gain, or do I use this sort of uh this situation for my advantage and just kill off Nero. Boom, that's his name. Um, so yeah, it's again, like, I feel as if the show is definitely going towards the route of Angelo being consumed by the mafia lifestyle, but I just feel as if they're not making that as apparent as it should be, you know? Maybe this is me just wanting to explain the show to myself a lot more, you know? But, like, it's definitely just been a sort of, I don't know what the word is, really, but it's not just been apparent and clear enough for me. I'm not all that clear on Angelo's, motives, you know. Maybe this is just like a thing they've done on purpose and been like, ah, surprise, he was actually working with Nero all along, wow. But like, I feel like they're obviously using that to their advantage here and just trying to like build this up for like a surprise ending. But at the moment, it's just been a sort of um guessing game almost with Angelo. Like, I don't understand where he's at right now. So whether that's on purpose or whether I'm actually supposed to be getting signals or here, well, that's up to the show at this point.
Yeah. Was that all you want to mention about 91 Days?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Normally next week cover Thunderbolt Fantasy, but Lewis is a bitch, so I switched shows so that we'd actually be able to talk about something. So we switched instead to some people. I actually got a comment someone saying I should switch it out for Mob Psycho 100, and I mean the show. I enjoy Mob Psycho 100. The last episode was like a peak episode. It's getting really good now, but
Not
I
much to
I
talk
had
about,
another
really.
show that I actually liked more, which was Alderamin. I don't remember the full title actually. It's like Alderman of the Sky or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, which I was enjoying more than expected when I picked it up, so I picked that one instead to do that. Although some quick thoughts: if you picked up the Thunderbolt Fantasy because you want to hear us talk about it, this was the peak episode. Everything that they built up to is now coming into play, and it'll be interesting to see how this finale plays out. Uh, Nice and quick thoughts, which I wish we could do for other shows because we're already an hour in.
Jesus, yeah.
And this is not a. I mean, we'll see how short we can make this, but we're gonna like. How should I put this? Let's just talk about our general thoughts on the show and not
Cool.
talk about any
Yeah.
specific
Yeah.
things in Alderamin because we're starting it up, even though we'll only like 3 episodes left after this. So, what do you think of Alderamin of the Sky, Lewis?
Okay, so brief thoughts. I love sort of, I guess, commanders within shows, you know, like that sort of like uh overseer, smart, intelligent sort of commander over an overall army that can like foresee sort of enemy movements and like anticipate those, and you kind of see like their plots and shit moving out, like shit like I guess with Lelouch and Code Geass, or uh stuff in Vanadis to a lesser extent. Like, I love those sort of like things, just like seeing plans, like especially like army plans just sort of like divulge out. I love those. So seeing that in this show definitely interested me a lot. Ikta is a very I don't want to say very good character, but he's definitely an interesting character, and I've definitely taken a great liking to him. Him just being set up to literally being a tool for the system which he despises is just I love it. Like, I like that sort of like sort of general approach anyways, like no matter in what way it's set up. um Ikta probably at this point in time is probably the selling point of the show for me. Like, it's not like I hate every other character in the show. Like, they're good. It's just like not enough attention has been placed on them. Like, you had the hottie, I forget his name. Like, I'm just like going on like Ikta's battles here, but like he had his like sort of interactions with his brothers, which were cool and everything. But like since that's all sort of dealt with right now, I feel like the concentration should sort of like once everything with this sort of like war has sort of maybe died down, but it will take a while for it to die down because we're right in the heat of it. Uh, Concentration should really be placed on Ikta's sort of like dilemma at the point, because I love him as a character, and he's definitely has that sort of like uh potential to be a very um interesting character, which would be cool to see from this point on. Um, as for the overall plot, yeah, it's good. I like when there's sort of a um how would I say this, a moral choice within the viewer. Like, you would see everything that the army has done, that Ikta has been working for so far, that you would see that, like, yeah, they've done some sort of not pleasant stuff, like with the burning down of villages and whatnot. Like, it's not been a very pleasant journey for them. It's not been a very pleasant journey for us as the viewer to kind of experience. But it's kind of like, how would you approach this sort of a thing? How would you sort of view this sort of thing in the modern day world? And it's a definitely good sort of like question towards the viewers in itself, which is kind of what I like to see in a show. But yeah, I really can't think of a major criticism which has hindered my sort of enjoyment for the show, because everything with like the character interactions, like the five main characters, they like they've been solid. Like they've had like very, I want to say, charismatic interactions as of this point, but like they have that sort of like sense of camaraderie that like it's hard to sort of grasp. Like, charm is a very hard thing to sort of get a hold of within the viewer. So when a show actually goes above and beyond to actually nail it, it's very nice to see. And I feel like Alderamin, within every one of their character interactions, even with Ikta and Red Haired Girl, like, they obviously got a history together, but like even with their sort of interactions, their day interactions with Red Haired Girl trying to control Ikta, just like kind of keeping. I want to keep it short. Um, like, it's all good. The character interactions have just been comedic. They've been funny when they need to be. Like, even the latest episode when they're like, "Are you a warrior or are you a hero?" Haha. Like, yeah, they've just been very good. Like, they've been like sort of lighthearted when they need to be, very serious when they need to be. Like, they nail and know how to do character interactions with the show. Yeah, I really like it. It's a good show.
Yeah, the salute bit at the end of the warrior hero thing was just great. That was like the icing on the cake. Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. I mean, it's why I switched. I figured to switch to this show, because I was enjoying it more than I expected to. I mainly like. I agree with the whole thing about like the loose style of like commanders and liking to see them come up with these smart plots that other people don't think of. Usually because they're so blinded by rage, they just go for the basic kill them all because we're strong option. So, which is implemented into the system in the show, which is nice because like part of the portrayal that I liked at the beginning that I figured I was gonna like this show was there's this portrayal of like all of these soldiers as like normal people. Like even in like the second episode, like the soldiers that come across the group, like they're just doing their job. Like they don't seem like dicks. They're just people doing their job. Like they're even drawn that way too. Like they look like side characters in any other high school story in any other show. They just seem like nice people just doing their job as soldiers, and then they just fucking murder the shit out of them. And like you're very much meant to feel bad for it. Like it's not glorifying. Like it's using war as a device to tell this story about this broken system of like assholes, and also the story about this guy who like understands that there's a level to think about on these battles than just the literal punch things in the face level, while also not glorifying war in the process. Like very much portraying the horrors and like tragedy of what can happen in it. And it's also nice to see, I mentioned it on Twitter when it was airing, but like it's so rare to see interactions between two characters of the opposite sex where it's not romantic. to see two characters who are close like that, which is nice, which is sort of what ReZero was going for, but isn't actually pulling it off as well as something like Alderamin is. Which, I mean, is partially not helped by the fucking fan base going like, oh my god, Rem waifu, like that doesn't help. But yeah, it's nice to see two characters, you know, able to rely on each other and like not have it be like immediately like, yeah, obviously we have to bone now because we're, you know, man and female. So it's nice that that's there. Like the fourth episode, I believe it was, where like he pulled her out of her blood craze was like really cool. So it's just nice to see those kind of interactions. I actually wish there was a bit more of them, but I can understand not wanting to overdo it a bit. You know, not you know, using the same trick multiple times. But it's like you said, it's fun, and it has like interesting ideas that it pulls off largely well, and actually gets pretty funny when it wants to be. Also, the ending is great, but that might just be because Redhead Girls with a fire theme might be preying on my nostalgia a bit too hard. So hey, was there anything else you wanted to mention about Alderman?
Yeah, no, I tried to just cover it up.
Yeah, we wanted it just to be quick. We'll be more in depth next week when we actually cover an episode, and we'll only have one episode of everything to cover next week, which means this won't be so absurdly long. It'll just be closer to an hour rather than straight up over. Cool. Yeah, that should do it for this week. Sorry it's late after 2 weeks of not having one. The first week I called off on my own because I wanted to work on the review. And then the second week we were actually going to do it, but Lewis was busy on Friday, and then I was busy on Saturday. So we just got fucked. Yeah. So that was unfortunate. Hopefully we can actually record on time next week. But any closing comments, Lewis?
No.
Nice closing comments. We will see you guys next week then. Bye-bye.
Bye.